I never saw much of my Uncle Hal and Aunt Paula, even though they lived in nearby Manhattan. They were always traveling to exotic countries, but my uncle gave me his stamp collection, and I received many of the children's books they wrote and illustrated. It was only later that I spent time with Paula, after she had lost everything.
Of course, I'm not happy to be here. Never imagined that I would end up in a shelter like this. But I am not going to contact your mother. Oh, I don't think Edith ever approved of me. No one was ever good enough for her little brother. Maybe she thought that because of me, Hal never became a great artist, never went to art school. Or maybe she thought that I was the one who wanted to travel all the time. Your parents ended up in the suburbs in a nice house with 3 children, 2 cars, 1 dachshund. It's funny how they ended up that way, considering their politics. They looked down at us as bohemians. Maybe they were afraid we would infect you children. Well, of course, we were bohemians, especially in those early days. We loved to travel. The Dalmatian coast, Morocco. Oh, Hal was making good money in those days as an illustrator and children's book author. We'd go to Tunisia, spend several months there. Hal would write down all the folk tales he heard, and that would be several children's books right there. He also sold his work to magazines. I remember one month when he sold his work to both Humpty Dumpty and Playboy. My doctor warned me not to get pregnant when we went overseas in 1962. But of course, that's what happened. We should have immediately flown home. But Hal didn't like airplanes. He preferred the romance of ships. I began to miss Carrie on the way home. The boat docked at the Canary Islands, and there was a doctor there who did something entirely unnecessary. That was that. I found it very difficult to do my work after that. Though Hal was still making good money, we continued to travel, but it was not the same. I began to worry about what would happen to us when we got older. We lived on the Lower East Side in a cheap apartment in an old building. We didn't have much in the way of savings. Later, the market turned against Hal. The editors and the publishers began to describe his work as old-fashioned. He had to take a job at the Metropolitan Museum as a security guard. Oh, he was so frustrated that he couldn't make a living from his art any longer. Oh, but at least he could look at the art on the walls. Well, my own career. My book, The Bear and the Fly, it sold so many copies. That was unexpected. But at least it helped us pay the rent. And then Hal got cancer. It took so little time for him to die. He didn't want to see your mother, but I think that's because he knew that your mother didn't really want to see him. Edith didn't like to be around the sick and the dying. Not that they spent a lot of time with us when Hal was healthy. Your parents would come into New York, go to movies, and go to that dentist of theirs. What's his name? Irving Perez. Yes, he was semi-famous for taking the fifth against Joe McCarthy in one of those anti-communist hearings of the 1950s. So your parents went out of their way to support him in his Midtown office, but they rarely came downtown to see us. Your mother thought that Hal was a failure. He'd published more than 100 books, and your mother was embarrassed because he wasn't Picasso. Maybe there was some envy there too. I don't know. When Hal died, I just wanted to sit in my apartment and drink. I didn't want to go outside. I didn't want to see people. Couldn't do my work. With Hal gone, my life was over. And then, on January 24th, 1998, a fireman came to my door, woke me up in the morning. "You have to leave immediately," he said. "Don't take anything with you. It's just temporary. They'll let you back in." So I put a coat on over my nightgown. I went outside into the cold. Outside, the fireman said that something had fallen off the building, that they had to assess the building's safety. Well, we waited in the cold. The mayor, Rudy Giuliani, he showed up. He walked around inside the building without a hard hat. We waited for them to let us back in. But they didn't let us back in, not even to get our things. They tore down the building. It took 12 hours. So I can't imagine that the building would have fallen down by itself. We lost everything. People lost their pets. There was one family had $5,000 in their mattress. They lost that too. And all because the landlord wanted to build something brand new as soon as possible in that space, and we had refused to leave our apartments. So, that's why I'm here, in this shelter. Waiting for the city to find me something new. We didn't have much, Hal and I, but all of our paintings and drawings were in the apartment. Sometimes I think it would have been better if they'd been stolen, because then at least I'd know that they still existed.